Good afternoon. Welcome to our session. I'm delighted to be joining you together with our distinguished panelists, and a special thanks to the organizers for putting this beautiful picture behind us. And I would like to start by challenging the title of our session. How could energy be coming with the same word, normalization? Energy and normalization doesn't go hand in hand. I mean, as you look around, you see that new normals last only a couple of months at the maximum. So things are changing. Energy industry is very dynamic, and it involves so many factors. It's not only investment, as we discussed in the previous session, or efficiency. You have the geopolitical tensions, unexpected events like the invasion of Ukraine, and increasing likelihood of a confrontation between China and the United States in the future, and technological breakthroughs, which are blessing but also somehow disruptive, and the funding priorities changing from one day to another, so that we have difficulty in following what's necessary. Therefore, normalization and energy, I think you have to stretch a little bit in order to make it relevant to our session. And the main area of focus for us today, of course, is the new sources and integration in the Euro-Mediterranean area. And in the previous discussion, we had also some little debate about East Mediterranean issues. But the Russian invasion of Ukraine clearly was a game changer. It also had significant psychological and geographical implications. What happened is Europe is now trying to develop a new supply architecture in energy away from Russia. We had heavy dependence on Russia, especially on gas, but also on oil, and nuclear, coal, and products. Now Europe is trying to diversify away. It's not easy. We have seen that. And also the trade. I was in Saudi Arabia 3 weeks ago, had the chance to meet with Prince Abdulaziz, the energy minister, very smart chap, and we were discussing about the sanctions against Russia, not only in oil and gas, but also in other areas. One point he made was very important. Now, as a result of sanctions being used as a punitive action, the oil and gas trade, or overall energy flows, have been disrupted. Now, more oil is flowing in the direction of Asia-Pacific, especially China and India. Also, Putin and Xi Jinping signed recently in Moscow another landmark deal about the power of Siberia, almost the same volume as the Nord Stream gas going through Russia to China in the future. But I was a diplomat in China. For ages, they've been talking about it. Normally, they agree 99%. This 1% is about the price. They couldn't agree. So probably they are going to have the same problem there. But here on our main topic, how this world crisis and dynamics would affect North Africa, Middle East, Africa deep down, as well as the Arab Gulf region, and whether there are more opportunities for Euro-Mediterranean trade, investment, infrastructure, and integration overall. So we have here, I think, the right blend of panelists, speakers. I'm privileged to be on the same panel with them. And I want to start with you, Ashraf. You are coming from the Arab Gulf, based in Bahrain. Yeah. And of course, it's a bit far from the area we are discussing. Yes. But how things are evolving there? Is there normalization in that region? We hear about, of course, Saudi Arabia, Iran, normalization of diplomatic ties, fine, Abraham Accords, but in the energy field, and how also this will affect our region here, Euromed. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank NATO Foundation for this invitation. I am very glad to be here today to discuss this very important issue. Again, the agreement were founded on the principles of tolerance and peaceful coexistence. In Bahrain, the most important thing, it was King Hamad Declaration of Tolerance in 2017. And when we're talking about the impact of the future of normalization on energy security, we have two aspects. Number one, cooperative security, and there are three examples here I can mention. Number one, the agreement between UAE, Jordan, and Israel to establish a cooperation in water and energy, and this form of cooperation wasn't possible before signing of normalization agreement. So this is very important development. Second, the establishment of form of friendship and cooperation between the Gulf countries and the Eastern Mediterranean FILA in 2021, and includes countries of normalization and regional and international parts. The last example is establishing NAGAF forum in 2022, Egypt, United States, Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, and Israel, and forming 6 groups of multilateral cooperation in fields of clean energy, education, coexistence, food and water security, health, regional security, and tourism. But when it comes to military security, as my colleague mentioned before, alliances and energy security, especially military alliances to confront energy security threats, I believe, this is my point of view, that normalization will not lead to emergency of military alliances to confront energy security threats for 5 reasons. Number one, it is too early to talk about regional security structure that includes normalization countries to confront energy security threats, because alliances leads to counter alliances. Our region witnessed 13 security alliances and initiatives from 1948 to 2019, including alliances to confront energy security threats. However, when oil tankers in Gulf were attacked in 2019 and 2021, I see was no decisive American reaction. Furthermore, when United States established the maritime military alliances for protection of maritime navigation, includes until now only 6 countries, 3 of them from the Gulf. Second, Bahrain and UAE support multilateral cooperation in field of energy. There were joint exercises in the Red Sea in November 2021, but if we see here, the Iranian response from one of Revolutionary Guard was that Israel can start the war, but the end will be in Iran's hand. So the priority for Bahrain and the Gulf countries to confront the threats of armed militia to energy security, especially drones, because energy security threats now includes infrastructures as well as important waterways. The number of Iranians incident threatening maritime security in the Gulf during the last 2 years reached to 44 times. Number 3, alliances require a unified military doctrine, or at least a system of military action similar to NATO. And this is difficult to achieve at the moment, because we must think why US proposal to establish Middle East Strategic Alliance, MESA, didn't succeed. And number 4, the absence of a unified vision. It's normal between GCC, because we have small and medium and big states, so we have 3 visions. I think it will affect on the future of normalization regarding to what happened recently between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And finally, I have to mention that the option of small states to achieve security in general are 3 options. The first one, self-security. So the 6 Gulf countries have, for example, 398 naval bases, but Iran, I think Iran more. Iran has 357 naval bases and perhaps more. The imbalance of power is the main challenge, the main dilemma for the Gulf countries. So the Gulf countries is trying to have a balance of power with the regional power. In previous, it was Iraq, now Iran. So this is a main permanent dilemma for the GCC. The second option is not taking a sides. But during the history, the Gulf countries couldn't exercise this option because their ships were targeted during the Iran-Iraq war. And one of them, these countries were invaded in 1990. So it is practically the GCC can't be avoided what happened in the region in the future. The third option is alliances. But before Ukrainian crisis, we were talking about United States as one of the main strategic partners of the Arab Gulf countries. But however, now we can't ignore the international competition towards our region generally and GCC specifically, and China and Russia and its impact on the future alliance. I think all this transformation will have its impact on our region in the future, and it will, of course, it will affect on the alliances and the regional security architecture, and we will not reach easily to regional security architecture in the near future. It will need time. It's too early to talk about that. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a simple question to follow up.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, China, Russia,
Yes.
and Iran increasingly influential and prevalent in the Gulf.
Yes.
And the US is pulling out, they say, Asia pivot. We know it's not happening yet quickly, but there is a tendency. European influence there is quite minimal. Do you think there is going to be such a geopolitical polarization where Russia, China-led group might perhaps have more influence in the Gulf as opposed to the West?
Thank you so much for your question. I think this is the competition between this great power in our region. It will affect, not in a positive way, it will be in a negative way, because the dilemma of small states is to have international alliances. But now, if we see what the concept of security has dramatically changed, now we don't have direct threat from Iraq. Iraq now not aggressive, but we still have enemy from Iran. And if we see, I wrote a paper about Iranian enemy discourse toward the GCC. More than 500 enemy the discourse during 10 years. It's this from media, from religion representative, from the religious leaders from Iran. So I think second point is, what's the meaning of regional security? Regional security now is not only, as I mentioned in my presentation, not only in the Gulf, regional security in the Horn of Africa and east of the Mediterranean. But for me, priority for the GCC is not the Mediterranean or Horn of Africa. Priority is still inside the Gulf, because we had oil tanker attacks, 2021, and we had cyber security challenges, and the main dilemma is building capability. So GCC is still in need of building capabilities, and who can offer that? I think NATO launched its initiative. ICI is still working, and Russia also still have great interest, and the Saudi Arabia great relation with Russia, and also we have China. But the result, it will depend on what is going on. If Russia, from my point of view, if Russia won the war, we will witness new international equation, and it will reflect directly to our region and reflect directly to our alliances with the United States, or we have to diversify our partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, Gramenos, pronunciation well?
Fantastic.
Excellent. So you represent here the Union of Mediterranean, and because we know that bilateral efforts are okay, but if it is multilateral, intergovernmental, there are greater chance of forging better regional dialogue and integration mechanisms. And you are doing a great job there, based in Barcelona. And how do you think this Euromed regional integration could be better achieved, and what are the obstacles to overcome?
Well, first of all, let me thank the organizers for inviting me in such an interesting debate. And also agree with you, nothing normal, absolutely. Actually, we are at a turning point. And we act under two very bad news. The first one is that the COVID pandemic has, if possible, worsened the already dramatic asymmetry that exists in the Mediterranean. I will explain it better. The second one is that we are the second fastest warming region in the world, and that the waters of the Mediterranean are the fastest warming in the world. Combined with this, there is something that is happening which is quite promising. That is that energy is a commodity and it has its own market, but at the same time it also serves other purposes. It's an enabler of development, of human rights, of sovereignty, and to a certain extent, the right energy of decarbonization. In the old outlook, all these different functions were considered competing. You could achieve one to the detriment of the other, but now it is the private sector himself that has realized that this is not true. Actually, you have a better market if energy also serves these purposes that are not specifically market-driven. And this is fundamental in the scenario that I touched upon. Let me just make it a little bit clearer. The Mediterranean is the second fastest warming region in the world, and this measurement comes with some predicted impacts. It would take me a whole day to list them. Just let me mention two. 250 million people in water scarcity the day after tomorrow, within 10, 15 years. Or a very steep sea level rise, up to 1 meter until the end of the century, but who cares, it's so far away. 20 centimeters in just 10, 15 years. And then again, who cares? 20 centimeters, nobody's scared. Maybe you think about the fragility of some coastal cities like our precious Venice, but the problem is not water covering the land. It's salty water entering coastal plains.
So you have to move perhaps from Barcelona to Hinterland?
Yeah, maybe we have to move. But the thing is that salty water that enters the plains. I mean, my ancestors, the Romans, had a certain wisdom, a good wisdom, but also a wicked one. And they said that if you want to submit a population, you should beat them in the battle. But if you want never to hear about them again, you should spread salt on their fields. It means sterilizing the plains where 40% of our agricultural production goes on, with some very soft and delicate spots. 20 centimeters sea level rise in 15 years. It means that it salinizes the delta of the Nile, jeopardizing food security of a country that has more than 100 million inhabitants. And I am in a house where we reflect about security. I do not need to elaborate on that. Even so, I mean, if we just took the whole collection of predicted impacts, we would not get the picture. We are entering into a situation of high instability because the very basis of our balances and identity are being threatened by climate change. Our region has its own identity, which is kind of peculiar. If you think about Europe, it should not exist. It's just the westernmost tip of Asia. Also, North Africa is kind of weird. It's Africa, but it's not Africa. We are kind of connected into what is the shaper of this identity. Already Montesquieu had understood that it is this very special climate that we have, a climate that allowed the agricultural revolution to take place here. The stabilizing effect of the Mediterranean made climate predictable, and it is in predictability that you can start thinking about managing the land, shifting from passive users of the territory to managers. And this shaped our identity. Now, the stabilizing action of the Mediterranean is not here anymore, so there is no more reason to be special Europe, special civilization. And on top of that, the other good thing about that region, which was that the good season, the season of productivity, was governed by the entrance of the Azores anticyclones. But now the Azores anticyclones is elbowed out by African anticyclones that cut Europe in half. It means if you believe that our identity is determined by climate, there is a new situation. That is that Europe is split in two, and Southern Europe becomes closer in interests to the northern shore of the Mediterranean. It seems so abstract, but let me give you an example. Europe is a tale of two warmings. On top, there is the fastest warming region with a lot of troubles, but also some potential advantages. For instance, the opening of new maritime routes, Northwest Passage, Northeast Passage, which are evaluated up to $11 billion a year. Fantastic. We are happy for our northern friends if they have at least some advantages to work together with permafrost. But if these routes become operational, the Suez Canal is worth nothing. The Mediterranean, as the sea of passage of more than 22% of global commerce, is worth nothing. On the other hand, we have witnessed a spontaneous increase in cooperation in agriculture and forestry between Southern Europe and North Africa. Why? Because the species which are vital and commerciable now in North Africa are the ones that can save our economies in 10, 15 years. So we are in a moment of high uncertainty, where everything is reshuffling. At the same time, this same very, how would I say, severe impacts would not be so dangerous if they fell over a homogeneous area. But this is not a homogeneous area. Just let me quote one thing. Of all international commerce in our region, 90% takes place among North Shore states, 9% between the North and the South, and only 0.9% among South Shore states. It means that we are in an area where there are the rich and the poor, those who can and those who can't. So what has this got to do with energy? We need to defuse these bombs. And energy can make the game without trade-offs. A more developed, more income-generating market will solve also all this bunch of problems. How? Well, thinking that science tells us that there is no one around the Mediterranean who is strong enough to face on its own a challenge of this pace and of this severity. But together, we have the means, I understand. We need to put everything together, starting from energy. The European Union wants to decarbonize by 2050, quantitatively impossible without counting on the renewables potentials of the South. The South wants to develop the renewable market, impossible if it's only local. There's not enough financial strength behind it. We could develop it even more, but the idea is that if we go this way, integrating energy markets, not only we integrate a market, but actually we start solving also the other problem, because energy is an enabler of growth, and it will rebalance the asymmetry, a real integration. So basically there is some magic. If we do what we have to do to counter climate change and injustice, actually we end up unwillingly solving the root causes of the real problem we never got rid of in the Mediterranean, a sea of civilization, but never a sea of peace. Maybe we will build a basis of peace.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question, quite hot from what you said. If you look at the north or southern part of Mediterranean, which is, as you say, a sea of civilization and 22% of the world commerce and what you have, but there are deep-seated problems between the North African countries. You know, Algeria is not talking to Morocco. Then you have Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, Turkey, Greece, Italy, Spain. So it's not an easy region to achieve compromise on many issues, let alone regional integration. Yeah. And how effective Union for Mediterranean could be in bridging the gaps and narrowing the differences so that there is a real regional dialogue and integration?
Yeah. Can I claim Chatham House rules?
Of course.
Nothing good. Okay. You don't hear...
You are on the record.
Yes. You don't hear a lot about the Union for the Mediterranean. It's not because we are shy. It's on purpose. Why? Because we tackle root causes, and we try to have people agree on serious and concrete problems. So if you make it surface at the public level, it becomes hijacked by all those sort of confrontations that cannot be avoided for historical reasons. But if you keep it quiet, then, you know, we have Israel collaborate with Palestine with us. We have things happening between Algeria and Morocco. And the important thing is that we tackle real problem without talking so much about it.
So that's the real value of Union for Mediterranean, of course.
And it works, I can tell you. Mobilized more than 6 billion euros in the past years in actions of this kind.
Yes, this is good news to hear. Well, Marco, of course, here is going to talk about, on his subject chosen, on behalf of Union Observatoire Méditerranée. But I know that he's also a very avid businessman in E&I, and so making clear-cut decisions on what to do and what not to do. So we could represent some of the talking shops, perhaps, but when you talk, you mean it. You mean business. You put money behind it as well. So also you recently, I mean, the ENI, because you will perhaps speak on behalf of the Observatory Mediterranean, but ENI has just made a landmark deal in Libya offshore, gas exploration, $8 billion. So that means you have confidence in the region, abilities, but also you have confidence that there is a center of consumption in Europe or elsewhere where you can market it. So from the business perspective, how do you see Euro-Mediterranean regional integration, investment environment? I'm not going to ask about geopolitics, that's something else. But so give us some light.
Thank you, Mehmet. And thank to the NATO Defense College for having me today. As you were mentioning, I'm not here with my usual, under my usual capacity with any, but in order to share the views of the OME, Observatory of the Mediterranean Energy, which is an organization that is focused on raising awareness of the potential of integration in the energy field in the Mediterranean area. OME has the ambition to be the voice of the energy sector in the Med, and has the strength of gathering companies such as Eni, EDF, Edison, Sonelgas, companies all around the Mediterranean shores, but also public institutions, think tanks, scientific institutional research centers. And our ambition is to accompany the energy transition with focused and very thoroughly prepared analysis. And in particular, every year we publish the Mediterranean Energy Perspective. Let me spend a few words on this, on the scenarios that we see for the energy in the Med, and then I will try also to address your question, changing my hat. Just to, let's say, share a few numbers and see where we are and where we can go. Let me just say that we can go on a first direction, which would be burning the planet, because we can, unfortunately, miss the Paris Agreement goals if we just go on implementing the stated policies, or we can reverse action and meet those goals of mitigating the climate problem, and this is the right direction. Between these two, let's say, very different scenarios, there is, on the one side, the possibility that we continue to consume energy as we are doing, and in the Med, the perspective is to increase the energy consumption by 30% in the next 30 years. So on the one side, you see energy and more energy consumed. On the other side, the other scenario requires that we reduce the energy we consume by more or less 25%. How do we fill this gap? What are the main drivers for that? I mean, I'm talking as a company member, also this applies also to public policies, to any kind of perspective. The first pillar, in any case, would be energy efficiency. One of the few good things that the crisis that we are in taught us is that there is always a ground for energy efficiency. For example, in Europe, we reduced the consumption of gas by 20% more or less, without suffering huge, let's say consequences. Of course, there were consequences, but the industrial base, the GDP, etc., was not, let's say, destroyed, while on average, with also some higher peaks, the energy, the industrial system in Europe reduced by 20% the use of gas, producing more or less the same things. If we manage to reduce the energy consumption in the Med of the next decades by 25%, we have done almost 40% of the effort that we need to do. And the Med, as Garmelos was saying, is one of the regions that is most affected by the climate change. It is not one of the main emitters. We are consuming about 7% of the energy in the world as Mediterranean regions. We are emitting 6% of global emissions. So we are not the biggest emitters if compared with the United States or China or in the future. But the main interest that we need to stop this because we are paying one of the heaviest costs of the climate. So I was saying energy efficient is the main thing to do, accounting for about 40% of the effort to reduce emissions. The second pillar is transforming the energy mix, and this will allow us to obtain another 40% of contribution. Of course, this means mainly transforming the energy system into renewables. And talking about renewables in the Med, on top of the photovoltaic, which is of course very important, we see as OME, but also as ENI, a great potential for wind and offshore wind, which is of course also evoking so many implications in terms of synergies with other economic sectors, but also challenges, security, possible conflicts with other economic perceptions. And in this respect, let me also name the fact that the most of offshore wind will be floating offshore production. That means plants that are 20, 30 miles off the shore. So you hardly can see them and are not conflicting with the tourism or with let's say we had a reduced impact on the perception because in a heavily populated region this is very important. And final let's say point, of course all this is and will be possible if we manage to share the capacity in innovation and in technology transformation. Of course, the most of it is in the north side of the Mediterranean. As the International Energy Agency tells us, most, let's say, half of the technologies that we need to implement the energy transition are not there yet. We need to discover them, to implement them. Well, we not only are, let's say, very focused on discovering new ways of producing, transporting, supplying and consuming energy, but we need in parallel to share this knowledge, to share this technology, to have them implemented in Egypt, in Morocco, in Algeria, while we go, let's say, in the frontier of the technology in Europe. This is key because without that, as someone said before, we will have not enough surface, not enough capacity for renewables in the European Union. We will have the technology, we will not have the surface, we will not have the capacity to reach the volumes which we need. I stop here for the time being.
Just one question again to follow up.
I forgot Libya, sorry.
Yes, well, I'll come to that later. But usually we talk about the hydrocarbon exports coming from North Africa and East Med to Europe.
Yeah.
But now things are changing. As you said, you would like to transform also fuels into renewables, and not only photovoltaic, but land and offshore wind as well. What is the prospect of North Africa, for example, and Middle East, exporting green energy to Europe, first? And second, about then the companies. Now we never talk about oil and gas companies. Each of them are transforming themselves into energy companies, including renewables, of course. But critical minerals and metals we have never talked about. They are becoming as important as oil, gas, and coal and renewables, like cobalt, lithium, and nickel. And I think this region is also rich in this regard. These are the future oil and gas of our industries. So this
Well,
two-level question.
Much complex one. So starting from hydrocarbons in North Africa and the perspective of transformation, I will also touch the Libya question. Claudia, in the previous panel, said it very clearly. In the mid and long term, most of the hydrocarbons and conventional energy that North Africa will be producing will stay in North Africa and East Med, because we have a growing population that over the 30 years is about 135 more million people asking for development, for access to energy. So we cannot imagine investing 8 billion euros in Libya to take the gas from Libya to Italy. Most of that gas will be for the Libyans. It is already this, because today we are not importing gas from Libya. Most of it is consumed to produce electricity in the country. And it will be more and more this in Egypt, in Libya, in Algeria. So the future of hydrocarbons in the region is for, let's say, self-consumption to be easy. But this is very important anyway, because we need to grant development to the region. As regards the transformation, and touching also the issue of new, let's say, resources and the critical minerals. Well, while the old world of conventional energy was something that didn't need much of integration, you could just take barrels and move them point to point, etc. For sure, the perspective of a new energy world based on electrons and hydrogen will definitely need a higher level of integration in terms, for example, of legislative frameworks, tariffs, regulatory compatibility between producers and consumers. Second, security. Well, security has been always an issue also for conventional energies, pipelines, etc. But not only for infrastructures, imagine power lines, but also for data and for critical minerals, security will be even more critical and important. So I am expecting an additional attention from policymakers, countries, to cover this side of the energy transition. So the security side of the energy transition will be key and cannot be reached without dialogue and coordination between the countries. You cannot imagine just each jurisdiction covering its own risk. This is, say, old fantasy.
Thank you, Marco. Lots of things to ask, but it shouldn't come from me, and I'm going to open it to the floor. Questions? I think first should come. Yes. You want to ask? I know. Let's start with you.
I am intrigued by the how large is this conversation? Because without even realizing that we are touching one item before the other in a very large picture, which goes beyond the Mediterranean in the end, certainly beyond the Eastern Mediterranean. I wish to ask again to the last speaker about this final remark, which from my point of view is very interesting, where he connects the problems of energy in the way it has been explained by you with the problems of security. Because this is we have tried in the outline of the conference to put this issue into the picture, but of course, in fact, we are obviously talking more about the energy issue rather than the security one, because it's absolutely normal. But perhaps he could develop, if you would like to do so, a little bit more, because I agree very much with this view, I think that we live in an interconnected world where issues are connected, and security is interpreted in many different ways, You can speak about security of this hall, for instance, or the security of the hotel. Now I think the issue is security in a rather larger world, which means cooperative security, means how to ensure that. I think this is the issue to me.
Thank you. Well, you are right, because the security concept also has changed because of the asymmetrical threats and risks that we are facing. You know, the Iranian-supported drones coming from Yemen wiped out half of Saudi Arabia's refining capacity and some of the fields. So they didn't have to spend billions of dollars for that. Then you have the cybersecurity, again, cheapest way of disrupting your power lines, and so terrorists, and so many security areas. Security of supply in the past was, you know, IEA and OPEC can talk to each other and sort it out. But now you have the security of transit, security of investment, security of critical infrastructure. The concept has evolved significantly. Now we have these modern challenges of security. So as company, of course, you can wear your hat as the E&I executive. What kind of security challenges you face?
Nowadays, of course, most of it is related to the conventional area of energy, but also, and I speak under control of my colleague, head of global security for ENI, but most of the new efforts are concentrated on what we call the, let's say, infrastructure plus technology plus data. I mean, this is not only, let's say, material security, but the protection of information and the protection of knowledge. I would say that as it is in the global strategic competition, just to name the biggest one between the US and China, infrastructure, technology and data are the real assets that we need to focus as countries, as companies, I would say also as single individuals. What is, let's say, astonishing is that we are discovering it only recently. I mean, energy was really undervalued in developed economies. We took energy for granted in terms also of security of supply, while this is, I mean, vital for any kind of aspects of our lives and economies.
And Gramianos, you represent a soft diplomacy organization. You don't have the hard power, but the security issues, I'm sure, come to fore in your organization as well. How do you deal with them?
They're actually the heart of our mandate. What we do is try to eliminate the root causes for conflicts, and this is the way we tackle security. While from an industrial point of view, you tackle these dimensions of data and things. What we try to do is make sure that if a big operation happens, it happens in a way that it doesn't produce secondary effects that then are causes for enhanced tension. It's a little bit abstract, but it becomes more concrete situation by situation. So let me make a narrative, which is not the case of anything we've done so far. Imagine that you decide for a market reason that you want to build a certain plant, and that the plant is competitive if it diminishes all its costs as much as possible, but this implies some externalities that will pollute a river. We try to reason with every stakeholder, and above all, have the industrial actor understand that in principle, you have a market advantage, but then you will have so many imported costs due to the destabilization that you have caused around you that you will actually end up being not competitive. This is on the punctual, but then we have a broader image. I underline the fact that Europe and the north and the south shore of the Mediterranean need to consider themselves interdependent. Now, let's talk about the so-called Green Deal. If we interpret the Green Deal as the ambition of a fantastic Europe to build the ivory tower of perfection and don't care about what's happening around, economists tell us that not only we leave our neighbors to their own fate, which might be good or not good, but actually we will induce some economic shocks. If this happens, we will have, as a consequence, a certain destabilization and so many imported costs that in the end, we will have no money to make our own Green Deal. This is the perspective in which we try to secure all these operations, interlinked operations.
Thank you. Ashraf, you already mentioned the security of shipping through the of course, the straits to the international markets, the cyber attacks, the Iranian threat, and so do you think that within GCC there is an effective mechanism to handle it regionally rather than leaving it to countries only? Or you will need support from the outside region
Yes.
to ensure security?
Yes, as I mentioned, GCC as a small state is still in need of international partners. Regarding to the changing of the concept of the security itself and its energy security, at the previous time, energy security was targeting from Iran-Iraq war, direct threats, but now Iran is the main threats, and if we see three dangerous indicators. Number one, Iran targeting Aramco facilities, 2019, 10 drones. And all defense failed to discover or to stop that. So it was a major transformation of the concept of the security in the Gulf region in whole, and Saudi Arabia for specifically. I think this is one of the main reasons. That's why Saudi Arabia began to have a direct dialogue with Iran. Still long way. Would not achieve the mutual goals in 1 year or 2 years, from my perspective. It will still time to reach to cooperation between two countries. Second point is, I think cybersecurity is a main challenge for GCC in generally and specifically for Bahrain, because GCC succeeded to have EU government during last 10 years. This is one of the basis of economic vision for Bahrain 2030. And the last is this is very important point, maritime disaster. I think GCC is still in need of to deal with maritime disaster. If we have maritime disaster in the GCC, pollution and or close the Strait of Hormuz or Bab al-Mandab, I think it will be disaster for the GCC. I think we need to have a scenario to how to deal with that, because we have in our region previous experience during Iran-Iraq war and during the liberation of Kuwait, and we have a great experience, but we're still in need of building capabilities from NATO.
But you mentioned also that the NATO is somehow involved. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes,
GCC, NATO.
Yeah, GCC, because NATO is dealing with us today. NATO launched its initiative towards GCC in 2004, and Bahrain, UAE, and Kuwait and Qatar joined. Still Saudi Arabia and Oman outside. But NATO make a lot of progress during 15 years. I wrote a book about that, the partnership between NATO and GCC during 15 years. We have a convention of crisis management and securing border, and also energy sectors. And recently, in 2017, NATO opened a regional center in Kuwait. And this center gives a lot of training of energy security and crisis management and border measures. So it's very important to have this international aid from NATO and also from the United States. And what is coming in our region, I think the competition between Russia and the United States and the cooperation, rapprochement between Russia and China, it will reflect also in our region in the future.
So 10 years down the road, how do you see Russia, China dominating the region more than the West is involved right now?
I don't think in the near future, but I think it depends on what happened in what's the result of Ukrainian war.
Let me have another question from the floor.
There's also from Zoom.
Yes, please go ahead. Introduce yourself first.
I'm Franco D'Amore from Istituto per la Competitività. It's a think tank based in Rome. Just, I would like to add a small comment on this issue of security issue. Is it true that in the decarbonized world, the sources are no more a concern, because we have domestic, let's say, resources like energy efficiency, which is domestic, the sun, the wind, and so on. we have the issue of rare materials, but also I think the issue of technologies. Because what is important in this decarbonized world is not the resources, but the technologies that convert these resources. Now, if we look at the data, we see that, for example, at patents, the energy patents, the share of energy patents of Europe is, I would say, negligible. China holds 30% of the patents in 2020. Then there is Japan, then there is United States, and then some Germany starts to come, and France, Italy is more than 1%. So how to address also this, the issue of avoiding the technology dependence in this new scenario?
Thank you for bringing the technology dimension. Let me have another question from the floor. Yes, sir. Microphone.
Thank you. My name is Tullio Morganti. I'm a freelance consultant. Now, I've heard during this presentation that somehow this crisis, energy crisis, caught us by surprise. What happened since 1973, the energy crisis, when at the time of the Yom Kippur War, we remained in Europe countries without one drop of oil. What has been done so far? Wasn't anybody thinking that a solution should have been found, and where are the solutions? If today, when we get blackmailed by Russia, we find ourselves in the same situation, if not worse, because now is more widespread the theme, because there is the matter of pollution, the matter of dependence on energy supplies. Are we spending our time in mumbling and talking about it, or are we taking concrete action for alternative to the energy resources? Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. And I'll have another question, and then we'll turn to the panel for answering. Last question.
There's one from Zoom.
Lady, yes.
Hello, I'm Anna. I'm a student of MENA region, and I wanted to...
Which region?
MENA region.
MENA region.
Okay. And I wanted to say a similar question of Ambassador Minutorizzo, but another challenge that I think we have to face up is nuclear, that because we are in a scenario where we have unconventional weapons, and like, for example, cyber attacks, but also nuclear. And I wanted to ask to all of you, but in particular the second speaker, Master Yeni, how can we coordinate the challenge of nuclear, for example, because I think it will be possible, for example, over Iran, and what will be the role of the EU in this scenario, where China policy is implementing his role in Africa, where there are many minerals. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, perhaps I can turn to the panel now. I think basically three questions. One is about the technology dimension of security. It's technology converting all our resources into energy, and more critical perhaps than conventional energy. And the second question, if I understood well, was about, rather than being a talking shop and rhetoric, what concrete actions to have the alternatives to Russia and others blackmailing us? And then the nuclear, which we haven't touched actually. That's a very good question. So could I start with you? Very briefly, I think each perhaps just 1 minute, if you have anything to say.
Yes. I will answer the last question about the challenge of cyber security. I think we have to re-establish partnership between small states, I mean GCC, and its partner, because I attended a lot of meetings with EU and NATO, and I asked them directly, if we have a cyber attack in GCC, can you offer help for us? The direct answer was no. Because according to Article 5, GCC is not NATO member. But we have re-establishment the meaning of partnership, because now, okay, we have element of this partnership, disarmament, border, crisis management, but now we have new security challenges like cyber, like drones, and transfer technology, and still we need of real partnership. And I think that's why I mean, what will going on in the international order, GCC will cooperate with a new partner if the new partner give them real security needs, cyber aids and technology to address the dangers of drones.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking me about nuclear, but I would not reply to that. I may have some academic thoughts, but we do not, as an organization, we do not enter into this issue. I would like instead to tackle the question, is it all blah blah, or something is being done? As I tried to say since the beginning, there is a small miracle happening. That is that private capital understood that certain so-called commons are actually beneficial to the market. And let me give you an example. Germany started investing 30 years ago in a new technology called hydrogen. It was kind of his own toy, their own toy. But then things started to become interesting in terms of needs which were not market needs, they were decarbonization needs. Today, they are investing 12 billion euros every single year, most of which are projected towards the South Shore. A lot of engagement, not only by the German government, but also by Siemens, etc., in Egypt, to develop solar potential for electrolysis. Same thing is happening towards Morocco. And ourselves as an organization, we baptized at COP27 2 new projected cables. And talking about this, I think that economy is the real driver. Although I work with policy, I think that economy is the real driver. You correct me if I'm wrong. Actually, OME is the guys who give us the info. Just one thing. But just one thing. 2 years ago, that I know, 6 underwater connections between North and South were seriously studied. Today, it's 256. A certain increase in 2 years.
Thank you. Marco, you have 10 seconds.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so 10 seconds, just transition is not a free meal. This is 10 seconds. If I have some more, starting from the patents, we need to go to the roots of this possible competition that as Italy or as Europe we could lose, but I'm optimistic that the capacity in terms of patents and the technology and research is still very strong in Europe. My company, for example, has one company 7,000 patents on the energy, chemicals, etc. So I'm not that, let's say, negative about the perspectives of competition on technology. But the roots is about university system, training. I mean, we need to invest on schools and etc. And this applies to all Europe. This would be another great deal, investing in training in Europe. Second, energy security, Yom Kippur. We are in a completely different world. I don't see Europe without energy, and even in the most difficult weeks of the crisis, we managed to have energy with very high prices. This was the problem. Not a little problem, but let us not forget that the system was not, it was heavily dependent, but not enough to be completely strangled by Russian gas. So there is already a level of the diversification that is very important to consider. Nuclear, well, I don't comment on let's say, non-civil nuclear. As regards civil nuclear, there are potential. Nuclear will be part of the contribution to all technologies to the transition, depending on the jurisdictions. Let me just mention the nuclear fusion, where also ENI is involved, which is the possible future of a very promising technology that is possible to be brought to industrial level in a decade or 10 to 15 years, which is very promising. And then I will stop here because the 10 seconds.
Thank you for the 10 seconds.
Have seen. Yeah. Thank
well, thank you. Well, I will not try to summarize all these wonderful deliberations we had, but it shows that energy is such a multidisciplinary area where it touches almost on everything from geopolitics to technology, finance, environment, climate change, security. And NATO, here we are under the hostship of NATO Defense College, of course, is not an energy organization, but it benefits from organizations like Union for Mediterranean, IEA, IRENA, and all others. And I think what we discuss here will feed into this process. But NATO has been quite late, actually, in handling the energy matters. Back in 2008, I remember, in the Budapest summit, for the first time, there was a mandate given to NATO about energy security. And it looks that I think there is need for NATO to work closer in an integrated manner with all the stakeholders, business, other international organizations, governments, civil society. And I'm glad that in this 1 hour, which we passed about 2 minutes, I think, we were able to provide a drop in the ocean. So we'll continue this dialogue. And thank you very much to all our great panelists and your patience.
So after this, how can I say, very dense discussion, where the chairman said almost all possible issues have been touched upon. This is the right moment, I think, to introduce the Director General of Political Affairs of the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, my colleague and friend Pasquale Ferrara, because he can put some clarity into all this. I'm sure that he will do. I know he's a man of vision, a man of study, and so it is a welcome intervention at this point. Pasquale, you are here, you have the floor. Prenderemo dalle tue labbra.
The President of the NATO Defense College Foundation, Ambassador Alessandro Midorizzo, my friend and colleagues, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I see two risks here. First, after this enlightening panel and also the previous session, the first risk that I will restate the obvious. The second risk for you is that I'm standing between you and the coffee break. So I try to keep this simple and short. A conflict is raging in the heart of Europe following the Russian aggression against Ukraine. But this is not an only European conflict. It's a conflict that is producing shockwaves all around the world. And it is not a war, but it is a global war from this point of view. And the first countries and the first region to be hit by this is not only, of course, Eastern Europe, but the Mediterranean region, where you see a variety of states and a variety of situations. There are fragile states. We are discussing these days about the possible collapse of Tunisia from the financial point of view. but also other strong states like Egypt are facing with the consequences of this conflict. For those of us that thought that globalization was over, maybe you have to rethink that. So globalization, as we have knew it, it's possibly over, but at the same time, transnationalization, the internationalization of the world as such, including the economy, is still there, and the consequences of the war as further evidence of this. So we have to deal with that. The case of Egypt, especially, there is a lot of concern in Egypt, especially regarding food security. Now, I want to stress something which is very important. Sometimes the sanctions that countries that are helping Ukraine against this aggression by Russia are accused of producing consequences, also in terms of food security, energy security, inflation, and so on. This is a mystification. The European Union as such never introduced any kind of sanction related to food or agricultural product. The causes are elsewhere. The causes have to do with the demand. The causes have to do with the inflation, that it is partially dependent on this disruption of the global economic order, but not related with that. So I want to be very clear since the inception. But at the same time, we need to take, in a way, advantage of this crisis in order to understand if there are also opportunities, as we say, in these cases. And the opportunities are there in terms of creating the awareness that there is an interdependence that is still there, that we should strengthen exactly because of this kind of problem that we are facing, and that in isolation we are not capable of coping with that. The case of Egypt. Egypt is the founder, like Italy and other countries, of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, and hosts its headquarters. Now, this is not only about gas, but it also has a content in terms of increasing energy supply sources, but also has to do with the willingness of the countries that belong to the forum to explore also renewable energies. So I think this is an important example of how cooperation can strengthen our resilience, also in terms of energy needs. But I would like also to mention the broader, more political scenario. I'm not an expert in energy, of course, and the broader political scenario also shows signs of improvement in different areas. I don't want to look very optimistic, but as a diplomat, we believe in the possibility to improve or resolve crisis, because otherwise we will change jobs, we'll do something different. And the first thing that I would like to mention in the broader scenario is the good news that comes from the normalization between Israel and some Arab countries. This has the potential to strengthen economic integration, so it's not only important from the political diplomatic point of view, while also improving the wider regional security partnerships. Now, the deepening of these regional ties could pave the way for a broader cooperation, promoting joint initiative in sectors such as energy security, in the wider meaning of the concept, and also climate change. The normalization agreements present new opportunities for cooperation, not only for the region, but also beyond it, including for the European Union and Italy. So we look at that normalization process with the utmost interest. And in this regard, I would like to mention the Memorandum of Understanding signed last June by the European Union, Egypt, and Israel on the supply of Israel gas via Egypt's exports to Europe. And the Memorandum of Understanding of a strategic partnership on renewable hydrogen between the European Union and Egypt, signed on November 2022, in the margin of the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. It is really a sign that climate change can be also a driver of innovation in terms of fostering cooperation between countries in new and renewable energies. Now, even where an official process of normalization is not in place yet between Israel and Lebanon, still we need to mention that the agreement on the long dispute maritime border between Israel and Lebanon is a very good news. It shows that through engagement and diplomacy, even intractable problems can be solved and transform a relationship into the beginning of a partnership, at least in some area that has to do with a problem that deals with the national sovereignty. So I think this is another good news from the region. Another element that I think it's worth mentioning is the fact that the normalization process that I mentioned before set into motion the Negev Forum. So infrastructure of course, it is at the early stage of development, an infrastructure of cooperation between the United States, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, and Bahrain. And we believe that the theme of energy transition is crucial for this positive regional dynamics, and stands ready to explore joint initiative with the members of the group. To play a relevant role in the larger Mediterranean area, as we call it, and the Gulf, it is Italy's natural inclination, I would say. Why I say that? Because there is a national style in terms of foreign policy that is to have always, and try to have always, a balanced approach, but above all, and this is very important for international relations and the perception of Italy in this region beyond, we do not have hidden agendas. So you read our mind. There is no second thoughts. And I think this is really important because in these days, this issue has to do with trust. And trust is very rare in the international arena. So we think that this can be an asset. So I don't want to overestimate the possible role of Italy in this region, but at the same time, we are very aware of the role that we have and the contribution that we can offer. In this spirit, trying to highlight positive elements, I would like to mention also the arrangement between Tehran and Riyadh to resume diplomatic ties. It's a long way to go. It's just an announcement. We have to see if this will translate in concrete deeds. But I think that it is really crucial that this development take place after many years of tension and confrontation between two key actors in the region. Now, when this aggression against Ukraine started, immediately we perceived the risk for us of being too dependent from Russian oil and gas. So, and the process of diversification of sources started. It was a design. So I think it's one of the cases where there was a strategy, and we tried to implement this strategy with concrete steps by engaging the countries of the Mediterranean. So the goal that, and we are quite confident that we'll be able to achieve this goal, is to become completely independent from Russian supplies by next year. So if you consider the beginning of the war, the dependency in terms of gas supplies was around 40% from Russia, and now we are well below that. We are around 15% and going down. So you may imagine the efforts that we did. Now, of course, this implies for us not only to conceptualize our relation with the Mediterranean all in terms of energy needs, because this will not be sufficient, will not be enough, and will have no real political added value. We would like to try to engage with the region in a different way. And you have heard in the last weeks talking about the Enrico Mattei plan. The Enrico Mattei plan, of course, takes the inspiration from a key figure, Enrico Mattei, that is one of the driver forces, I mean, of the post-reconstruction and the national industrial policy, but also with a style, again, a style in foreign policy, which is far from being just based on energy, but it is based on a relation built on mutual benefit, mutual trust, and equal foot. I think this is something that is really crucial. And we are trying to, of course, this is a project. Now, in this project, we need to put some substance that has to do with cooperation, has to do, of course, with energy, but also, I would say, in terms of a political dialogue. The interconnection are crucial. For instance, we welcome the role played by the European Commission in supporting the ELMED electrical interconnection project between Italy and Tunisia, but this can go also beyond that. There are new initiatives. I mentioned countries that are, in a way, helping us to become more independent from Russian gas, like Algeria, but also a new agreement was signed by Eni with Libya. There are a lot of confidence that this can also bring new sources. To conclude, I think that the right way of taking advantage, if any, from this international destabilization that was created by the Russian aggression against Ukraine is by trying to look at the different region from a new perspective. And for the Mediterranean, I think we have to go beyond the traditional divide that suggests that there is a northern shore and southern shore. There are no shores in the Mediterranean. There is one political, economic, environmental context, and we have to deal with that in an holistic and comprehensive way. And we are engaged in that, and we are also supporting all the initiatives that the European Union is taking towards this direction. For instance, Repower EU, but also this new, very interesting initiative that is the Global Gateways, with some priorities that has to do not only with infrastructures, but also with economic and political engagement. So all in all, I think that we are in a crucial moment, and we have to play our role in a constructing way. We are ready to do that, but also not undervaluated the possibility of innovation. Innovation is crucial in terms of technology, but also innovation is crucial in terms of diplomacy and politics. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Ambassador Ferrara. Now there's a coffee break of 20 minutes, but then we'll have a last session, very important, and the concluding remarks also very important. So as they say in TV, stay here, don't go away.